More than one-third of all available delegates for both the Republican and Democratic presidential nominations are at stake today. And one of the main issues on American voters' minds this Super Tuesday is immigration. Nearly half of respondents to a recent CBS News poll labeled the situation at the U.S. Mexico border a crisis, and another 30% of them called the issue very serious. Chuck Rocha and Matt Gorman are in Washington to delve into this with me. Chuck is a Democratic strategist and the president of the political organization Solidarity Strategies, and Matt is a Republican strategist who formerly served as a senior advisor for Senator Tim Scott's presidential campaign. Welcome to you both. Chuck, I'll start with you. Border security has become a big deal for voters from both parties. Where would you rank the issue of immigration right now when it comes to the level of importance in the 2024 election?
I think you're going to see both parties talking a lot about immigration as we move in, and a lot today. There's been a lot of ads that people aren't talking about that have already been run by both sides. Today is Super Tuesday. There's people voting all over the country. In the huge state of California, where it's winner take all in a lot of places, where the top two will make it outside of the presidential campaign that we've been talking about. You've seen all the bills in Congress that have failed to make it from the Senate to the House. You see Republicans using the issue as a way to distract folks away from the Dobbs decision, which the Democrats want to use to make sure that they're turning out their base. It's just an issue that's not going to go away anytime soon between now and November.
Given that it's not going to go away, Matt, what does the Republican Party have to do to show that it is serious about tackling this issue? And did the Speaker of the House and the presidential contender, Donald Trump, make a mistake when they so quickly discouraged the bipartisan consensus that was building in the Senate?
I think the fundamental flaw with that was it didn't have the House as part of any negotiation. It was like the Sixth Sense. It was dead before people really even recognized it was. You need to have the House, especially with now, it was a 3-vote margin then, 2-vote margin now, a part of those discussions. We're never going to get an immigration bill through with that narrow of a margin without them being at the table. Now, look, I think the longer this thing goes, Joe Biden is the president. He owns this situation at the border. And even you're seeing him finally recognize that he can do some sort of things, executive actions, including the national emergency he took away in the first day of office. He can reinstall that. He can do Remain in Mexico policy again. He can do things unilaterally to help make the situation down there better. But Chuck is right. It's becoming a massive issue for voters. I heard on the trail with Tim Scott all the time, and places that aren't that close to the border, places like Iowa, places in the Midwest. It's becoming now, with the economy, one of those top issues that you're hearing resonate across the country.
No question. And Chuck, it's been really interesting to see the White House pondering whether it should present an executive order that would tighten the asylum system. That's just something you're not used to seeing from a Democratic president. What else should President Biden be doing to address his handling of the border as we get closer to the general election? And if he gets tough, does he risk alienating parts of his progressive base?
I think you saw an example of this when he went to the border last week. Ironically, the same time Donald Trump was at the border, when he looked into the camera and said, "Donald Trump, meet me here. Let's figure this out. I'm willing to work with you to fix the problem. Let's pass a bill. Let's get something done." And with Democrats, a lot of time, that's the first step. When's the last time you saw a Democrat say, "Come on, Republicans, let's figure out how to get something done"? That's how important it is for him, not only to appear like he's getting something done, but not just saying that there's nothing happening. There's nothing happening. Is there going to be an executive action? Is there going to be some other kind of plan? He's got to have a plan. I think this is a good first step.
Matt, if the president does announce an executive order, if he does argue, let's say in the State of the Union address, that he's been pushing for a bipartisan border deal and he's being spurned by Republicans, what does former President Trump do then to show that he would be more on top of this issue?
I think a couple things. I think no matter what Biden does, an executive order, it will not go as far as a Republican would in office, right? Like for no other reason, think of it this way. I mean, we've all done this a long time. Normally, the price of entry for a discussion about border security in the past was something about what to do with the folks here illegally right now. Pathway to citizenship, pathway to whatever, right? The Overton window has shifted where you're not hearing that. It is solely focused kind of on the security at the border. I think it shows how far this window is talked about and how really folks need to come towards that side of things, less so on the Democratic side.
Right. The discussion has really shifted in the Republicans' direction. Chuck Rocha and Matt Gorman, thanks so much for speaking with me about this today.
Thanks, Nancy.